Today?
All right, guys, let's go ahead and start page 41. Let's title this Covalent Naming. So one of y'all had already asked me before we started the notes, like, hey, didn't we do this already? You looked at the practice sheet. We were like, we already named compounds, right? Which is true. Y'all did, but y'all did it for ionic. The rules for covalent are slightly different. For example, we're not going to use Roman numerals and things like that. So personally, I think covalent naming is easier, in my opinion. But we'll see. Okay, before we start, I want you to divide your paper into 4 again, like we did for the past 2 days.
Yeah, I need the ruler too.
There's rulers over there by Milan.
They don't need to be equal. Like one of them can be like slightly smaller, if that makes sense.
Does anyone else need a ruler?
Oh yeah, rulers.
Okay.
Don't judge my lines. They're probably, but what? Evan.
Right, you need a notebook, paper.
I'm straight.
What do you need then for your shirt?
I have a boyfriend.
I'm sorry. I have M&M's.
Oh my God.
What? What? I don't know what you're saying. Oh, it's crooked. I thought you said it's crazy. I was like, what's crazy? It's okay.
Wait, you moved my ruler.
If the lines aren't perfectly straight, guys, it is okay. No worries. It's okay.
It's not straight.
It's okay. It's okay.
I am straight.
Their lines aren't straight. So there.
You know who else did? You.
All right, guys, attention back up here. Eyes and ears up here. Okay, so just so we make sure we are all on the same page, what is a covalent bond between a who and a who? Non-metal and a non-metal, right? Good job. So this is bonds.
But are they both conductors?
Well, they're non-metal, so they would not be conductors. But good question, babe. 2 or more non-metals. And I know we've talked about this before, but just to reiterate, where are the non-metals located on the periodic table? On this side, right? Like to the right of the staircase. Good job. Okay. So like I said, the rules are a little different. For covalent bonds, when we are naming them, there are no polyatomics and no Roman numerals, which is nice because I feel like the Roman numerals are kind of a pain because you kind of have to work backwards with it. But this is nice, no Roman numerals, but we are going to be using prefixes, and I'll show y'all what prefixes we need to use. Another little note, and this is going to go hand in hand with the prefixes, and we're going to write those over here. But before that, the first element never says mono. What does the prefix mono mean? One, right? Singular, exactly. So for example, if I have carbon dioxide, which is CO2, I'm saying dioxide because the prefix di means 2, right? But I'm not going to say monocarbon dioxide. The first element, if it only has 1, we do not need to do mono. Does that make sense? Okay.
On the top that goes down, one is his bonds.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shortened between. BTWN. Bonds between 2 or more nonmetals. Let me give y'all a few seconds to get all of that down. I'm going to grab my water. Thank you. They're a little grown out. I need to go a little too close to
Guys, I'm like broke. I'm broke. Like,
Christmas. It's Christmas season. It'll do that to you.
$10. I just spent $240.
Girlfriend.
I bet. I'm writing.
I'm praying for your bank account, Swift. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the prefixes over here. So these are Greek prefixes.
Why not Roman?
Why not Roman?
Because those were used for ionic charges.
And we use Greek for covalent. The scientists like to be fancy. All right, I want you to number 1 through 10. So just 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. And put little dashes next to all of them so we can identify what prefix goes with each number. We just said 1 means mono and 2 is di. Can anyone guess what 3 is? I think I heard it. Try, right? Good. Like triangle, 3 sides. Some of these may be familiar to you. Does anyone know 4? No, that was a good guess though. I heard like quad, but you would think it was.
Why?
It's tetra.
Oh, like Tetris?
Well, the next one has to be penta.
Penta, right? Good, because of pentagon, right?
I guess.
So what do you think 6 is?
Sexta.
No. What's a 6-sided shape? What is it called?
A hexagon.
A hexagon, right? So the prefix is hexa, exactly. Good job. 7 is a little weird. It's hepta. Hepta? What do you think 8 is?
Octa.
Octa, right? Like an octagon. Good job. Octa. 9 is nana or nona? I think it's nana. And 10 is deca.
Like a dodecahedron.
So these are all the prefixes we're going to use, and these are used for the names. But like I said, if I have carbon dioxide, it's not monocarbon dioxide. So we can leave off the mono. But if this carbon right here had a 2, dicarbon dioxide. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so I see a couple, I think we're good. I see no pencils moving. Okay, my bad, Evan.
Alright, I'm good.
Okay, so let's look at another section down here. So, y'all know chem, there's always an exception or like a little special rule that we need to be aware of. So, for covalent naming, it's when adding Greek prefixes, bless you. I heard someone say, I don't know if someone sneezed. Bless you, Finch. When adding Greek prefixes and 2 vowels are next to each other, and I'm going to show y'all exactly what this means because at first it's a little confusing, but I'm going to give an example. Are next to each other, the A or O at the end of the prefix is dropped. On this side right here, I'm going to show y'all exactly what I mean by that. Because you're gonna notice that sometimes you're gonna have 2 vowels next to each other, and it's kind of hard to pronounce, and it just doesn't really English the way we need it to. So we have to change it. Another little note down here. However, the I in the prefix tri or die, so if we're talking about 2 or 3, is never. Emphasis on never. Never dropped. So if it's an O or an A, we're going to drop it, but if it's an I, we are going to leave it alone. And the only ones that end in I are die and try. So everything else would change if it's next to another vowel. I'm going to give you a few seconds to finish writing that down, and then I'm going to show you what I mean. When y'all are finishing, I'm going to get a paper.
Why does the pen I am currently writing
Okay. Say you got this schedule months in advance with the exact day, and it says you don't know the time yet. Just don't schedule anything on that day, right? And then when they message saying the time, people are like, "Oh, I can't go."
I see a couple pencils moving still, so about a few more seconds, guys.
And all I said, well, I have everything almost planned around your request. If you're trying to do it every day, it's too late.
Especially if you're 15.
Because I
I'm powered.
Okay. Refocus, guys. Let's stop the conversations and let's continue on the last side. Okay. For example, if I have oxygen, right, a variation of oxygen, and it's
Evan.
oxygen with a subscript of 9, you would think it would say this. Nona oxide. But this A and the O really don't need to be next to each other. So what we would do is let me highlight this actually, so it's easier to see. I have this A and O next to each other, but we don't want that. I'm going to take this A away. Yes, O9.
So it'll be no monoxide.
Yes, or monoxide, exactly.
That's silly.
It is kind of silly, honestly. It does matter. So for example, you're going to take the name away from the prefix. That was a great question, Devin. If y'all didn't hear him, he said, does it matter if we take the A or the O away, right? This A is part of the prefix. You're going to drop the vowel that belongs to the prefix, not the vowel that would belong to the element itself. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. That was a great question, babe. For example, I have another one. If I'm talking about oxygen 1, which is really just oxygen, right? We don't need to write the 1. You would think it's going to be called we would pronounce it monoxide, but this looks like monoxide, right? Which sounds a little bit silly. So same thing. We are going to drop the vowel that belongs to the prefix mono, and it's just going to be monoxide. So now it is actually monoxide and not monoxide, because that sounds a little bit silly. Yes. So another great question, babe. If y'all didn't hear Devin, he asked over here to the side, is it only try and die that you leave the vowel with? And the answer is yes. If you look at your list of prefixes, guys, you'll notice that all of them end in an O or an A, except for die or try. So all of those would follow this rule, except for the ones that end in I. We could leave those alone. Because, for example, if I had, and let me show y'all what this would look like. If I have if I have O3, right, and I say, okay, O3, this is trioxide, that makes sense to us, right? Mm-hmm. This I and this O can be next to each other, and it's totally cool. But it's when something ends in an O or an A that the spelling and the wording becomes a little bit funky. Do we have any other questions about that? I heard miss. Yes, babe.
Wouldn't one molecule of oxygen just be oxygen, or is it considered
Come again, what did you say?
So she asked if, because I gave the example of oxygen and it's monoxide, is that a compound or it's just an element?
So whenever an element is in its pure state, it is the name of the element. So it'll be oxygen. So when we're talking about That'll just be oxygen. It can't exist as O1. It's unstable.
So, Donna, so for example, if pretend, y'all don't need to write this down. Here's a sticky. If we had like CO, right? This would be carbon monoxide. Does that make sense? So that's when the mono would be accounted for when it's part of a compound. Does that make sense, guys?
So, if you want to write, like if you want to put the C in front of that O, yeah. And if you write carbon, it would be carbon monoxide. But whenever you guys are naming compounds, you never use mono in the first element. So it's not monocarbon monoxide. Does that make sense? It's carbon and monoxide.
Just the second element, exactly.
So the second element only takes the mono part.
So could we write that down somewhere?
Yeah, of course.
Wait, that's right.
Right here. First element never says mono.
Oh my God.
So your first element listed will only have a prefix if that number of atoms are greater than 1. Okay, let's look at the little half sheet that y'all picked up. You don't have one, babe? They're in the basket in the front. No, I don't think that's it. They're in the front.
On the little half sheet, guys, there's, I want to say 3 elements or 3 compounds, 3 covalents that don't follow traditional naming, but they're very common. It's kind of like water. Water's actual name is dihydrogen monoxide,
This one?
right? That's real water. But it's so common that you and I just call it water. Does that make sense? So there's other elements that have a specific covalent name, but they have a common name that they go by. Okay, so methane and what was the other?
Ammonia, I believe.
Yeah.
So before we practice, let's look at ammonia. Do any of y'all remember the formula for ammonia when y'all were working with the polyatomics? NH3. You're super close, babe.
Very close.
Good. So this is NH3. Like Ms. Garza said, it's not going to follow traditional rules because there are certain compounds that are so commonly used that we don't call them by their scientific name. Yes, babe. So it's going to be, yes, it's going to be on your list of polyatomics. But ammonia is a polyatomic when we combine it with a metal. Does that make sense? But ammonia itself, NH3, is a covalent bond because nitrogen and hydrogen are both nonmetals. Does that make sense? What's up, babe? Evan?
What's the name of this unit?
Covalent bonding.
When's the Breaking Bad unit?
It ain't never gonna happen.
Silly goose. Okay, so let's look at the other one I wanted to point out is CH4. So you may be thinking in your head this should have a scientific name, but it is called methane. It's just another commonly used compound. So those are the 2 exceptions I wanted to look at first. Okay. This is a practice sheet for y'all, but I'm more than happy to go through like 2 or 3. Are there any of them that y'all are looking at and you're like, I don't even know where to start? The first one? Okay. What else?
S plus 6.
Where, babe?
11.
Selenium fluoride, I think.
Okay. And then anything else that you're looking at and you're like, whoa.
6.
Number 6? Okay. Let's look at 1, 6, 11, and then we'll kind of check in and see where we're at. Okay. So, what is the symbol for the element antimony?
I don't know.
That's a great question. Look at your periodic table, guys. The symbol for antimony.
I think it's element 50,
Here,
but,
no, 51.
No, element 50 is 10.
oh, just kidding. 51, there we go. Something like that.
SB, right?
Very good.
Is there a prefix in front of antimony? So how many is it? 1, right? Good. So I'm just going to write SB on the top. I have tribromide. What does bromide sound like? Bromine. And what is the prefix tri mean? Br3, right? So my formula would be SB, BR3. The nice thing about covalent bonding is that you don't need to work backwards, guys. Like, you know, with ionic, you'd be like, oh, if it's circle, crossed, and dropped, that means that this number belonged here. We don't need to do that here, which is really nice. It's a little bit more straightforward.
Yay. Easy.
Does anyone have a question about this first one and how we got this?
Nice.
No, okay? Okay, number 6, dinitrogen trioxide. What element is dinitrogen talking about? Nitrogen, right? And how many nitrogens? 2, right? Because I have di in front of it. I have trioxide. Oxygen, good, and it has 3, right? Devin looked at the prefix,
Right.
he said, okay, tri means 3. So my formula would be
N2O3.
N2O3. Good job. Do we have any questions about this one? No? Good? Okay, let's look at number 11. What is the name of the element Se? Selenium, right? Good. And what is the name for the element F? Fluorine, right? Or fluoride, right? We would change the name. And what is the prefix for 6? Hexa. So we would have hexa. Am I going to say hexafluorine? Hexafluoride. Good job. Do we have any other questions or any other ones we would like to look over as a group before you work independently or together? We're good? Okay, I'm going to walk around and me and Ms. Garza will help you out. You can work independently, listen to music, or you can work together or in like a small little group.
There is also the quiz from yesterday. If you guys did not get a chance to complete that little Schoology quiz, please
Yes.
work on that. I will be syncing grades today. And then sending emails to parents saying, help your child figure out their life.
I don't know, but go on Schoology and check because you'll be able to see. We will have a quiz over covalent bonding tomorrow. So if you have any question, please let me know, guys. Let me zoom this out so y'all can see.
It's high.